Over the past month, groups on the secure messaging app Telegram, who usually promote anti-vaccine and COVID conspiracy theories, have found a new topic to discuss. The war in Ukraine has grabbed their attention, just like it has most of us. But one particular story has been making the rounds more than others. An old conspiracy theory that the US runs bioweapons labs around the world, which we discussed in the last episode, has been resurfacing. It's even spread in Telegram groups as far away from the war as Australia.
This is a long-running conspiracy theory, but when something like this happens, a war that everyone is watching in the world, it's very easy for people who are already into these theories to spin it in a way that makes it more convincing to themselves or to people that they want to convince.
This is Esther Chan. She's the Australia Bureau Chief for the fact-checking nonprofit First Draft News and a former director at AFP Fact Check, two global leaders at combating disinformation and misinformation in popular media. She's watching the country's conspiracy scene pivot from anti-vax theories to ones supporting the invasion of Ukraine. Why is this happening? And where can we expect it to go next? Before the war, Russia wasn't really on the radar in terms of the groups that Esther tracks over in Australia, but as the invasion started dominating media headlines, pro-Russia narratives seemed to tap into their anti-establishment belief system and their distrust in authorities and institutions.
I think people are very familiar with the narrative that the West is no good to us. So it's easy when something like this happens, it's almost like a trigger point to kind of confirming your belief that, the West or the US is funding laboratories in Ukraine, so they're probably up to no good there.
Another theme that Esther spotted in the Australian group she tracks is the claim made by Russia that Ukrainians are all Nazis. This is hard for a fact checker to debunk unless they can verify the political beliefs of every single person in Ukraine. Obviously, an impossible task.
It has also to do with the anti-immigration sentiment in some of the Australian groups for a number of years now. The narrative goes, because Australia may be opening doors to some Ukrainian refugees, they would be importing people who are like Nazis or fascists. So for a fact checker, there's kind of no way for you to fact check it, apart from deciding whether you should point it out so that people are aware that problematic narratives like these are circulating online.
Narratives like these may not stem from a single false image or video, but Esther has a pretty good idea where they come from and how they spread.
If you watch state-sponsored sources closely, you can tell how a narrative emerges and then how it kind of takes shape in different media outlets via different pundits talking about it on their talk shows.
At this point, NATO exists primarily to torment Vladimir Putin, who, whatever his many faults, has no intention of invading Western Europe.
And sometimes you can see them being shared on social media platforms.
It seems from what you're saying that conspiracies love a vacuum where there is no information, where there is no explicit reason. Conspiracy theorists love to just fill in the blank. Say, my reason is as good as anybody else's.
Yeah, we at First Draft, we usually call this phenomenon a data void. So exactly that situation where you just don't have enough credible information to answer all the questions, right? Because you do want to put out fact-checked information out there to stop the spread of misinformation. But then you can't really rush it because sometimes it does take a little bit of time to get to the conclusion.
This is where disinformation, that's content deliberately created to be misleading, and misinformation, meaning something that's false but not necessarily created maliciously, can all too easily start circulating.
I don't think most people sharing misinformation do it because they have an agenda. Some people obviously do, but most of them are just sharing because they're concerned, they're not sure, and they want to find answers.
Not all of the misleading content people have been sharing as they search for information is necessarily harmful. For example, Esther says she spotted a picture of an old man cradling his cat making the rounds, with text saying he was escaping Russian shelling. But the image was actually from 2018 and was taken after a fire in Turkey.
Some people would argue that what is really the importance of pointing out something like that, because it did happen, it's just old. But I think it's important whenever you can talk about these things, because it depends on the content.
And other pieces of content are clearly created with malicious intent. Let's take, for example, a deep fake video of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that did the rounds, which you may have heard about.
It wasn't actually him, but it shows someone that looks exactly like him telling Ukrainians to surrender, right? So that was deepfake, and a lot of news organizations called that out really quickly. By now, we're probably a bit more well-trained to look for signs of synthetic media. If you're not well-trained, if you're not journalists, chances are you just may not realize it's not even a real person. What if a large enough number of Ukrainians believe in him and they all go and surrender? The impact can be big in that situation.
What is something that you and your peers are concerned about around the corner?
I think there are a lot of claims, a lot of narratives that are basically not exactly fact-checkable at the moment. So you may need a little bit of time to see how it evolves and then find new evidence. And then second thing is the overgeneralization of some of the online claims. So for example, in this ongoing war, we've seen a lot of comments that there is Russian disinformation. So what does Russian disinformation mean, right? It means disinformation coming from Russia. By nature, that's not quite right, unless you can establish that it's actually coming from a Russian source, right? If you stick to this term, Russian disinformation, instead of misinformation about the Russian-Ukrainian situation, it's just going to kind of add fuel to the flame.
As this war progresses, we're going to be keeping an eye firmly fixed on how the battle over information plays out. Whether it's deep fakes, conspiracy theories, or questionable narratives, we aim to get to the bottom of whatever is going viral and help you stay one step ahead. Until next time, I'm Hari Srinivasan, and this is Take on Fake. Thanks for watching.